They hear him. Down goes Frazier. Down goes Frazier.
Real eyes realize real lies. I think Tupac was the one who said that, or I saw it on a shirt or something to that effect. So that applies to the boxing game. Tank's pay-per-view numbers. Oh, we're going to talk about it on this one, folks. And you're going to want to pay attention to this one because I'm going to teach you how to see through the politics that is boxing. First off, let me say this. I'm not here to serve bias, and I'm not here to intentionally serve narratives at all. I'm here to talk about the sport of boxing as a whole. There's a lot of teams, there's a lot of factions in this boxing game. It's irritating and it's confounding. It's very difficult to build a following in this niche if you don't ride a wave, if you don't worship PBC and Al Heyman, if you're not anti-PBC and anti-Al Heyman, if you don't ride the Tank train, if you're not a Canelo fanboy. Me, I'm a fan of boxing, the sport. I encompass it all. I don't ride any particular waves. I don't particularly dislike any fighter or anything to that effect. But Tank Davis's pay-per-view numbers got everyone in an uproar currently in the online world, specifically the PBC fanboys and the anti-PBC committee. They seem to be warring very heavily about this, and I get it. We all need views, but I'm going to help you, to those of you who follow my content, understand how to break this nonsense down so that at least you have some ability to see. Now, journalists in the past go to college, they get their graduate degrees, and the whole point of it is so that they understand how to operate their job with a fairly unbiased lens and operate with integrity. Integrity of information, integrity of the things they write, integrity of the stuff they receive from their sources. I didn't go to school for journalism. I went to school for engineering. For those of you that don't know, I'm a pharmaceutical engineer. I say it every single episode. Now, I do have a certain ability to process information critically and analyze it, and I know how to check the difference between reliable sources of information and unreliable sources of information. So first off, to begin, normally when it is a raging success of a pay-per-view event, the corporate company will have a corporate representative speak and tell you what those figures are. Oh, Canelo did 800,000. Canelo did 1.2 million. Floyd and Manny did 4 million. The corporate companies will release those numbers almost a day or two, usually no more than 3 days afterwards. When it takes longer than that, it's because they're deciding what kind of information they want to release to the public and how. Okay, so it took us almost 2 weeks before we finally started to see some Tank Davis versus Hector Garcia pay-per-view numbers back. Do we pocket watch? Hell yes, we pocket watch. Do we care about pay-per-views? Yes, we do. We live in a capitalistic society. There's no point in virtue signaling on Hot Boxing Minutes channel. The only real religion in this country of the USA is capitalism. We can pretend that there's all these other religious beliefs and that, there's morals and stuff. The bottom line is we have been raised and indoctrinated to think about money, to pocket watch, pay-per-view. It's all part of our natural way we think as humans. That's why when we interact with strangers, one of the first things we ask a person that we're trying to network with is, what do you do for a living? The reason why we ask people, what do you do for a living, is because we want to assess what their worth is and how valuable they are to us when we interact with them. That's a point of indoctrination, capitalistic indoctrination. Whether or not you know it or not, you are trying to assess people by their material value so you can assess how much importance you place on the conversation that you're having with them. That's free game. Next time I'm charging you. So, the first numbers that got released were by Rick Glacier. Rick Glacier said that the pay-per-view only did 61,000 buys. Can you imagine that? Now, just to let you know, it sold a record over $5 million of money generated at the gate, which set a record for that arena out there in Washington, D.C. Now, I could tell you right now, just based on the amount of feedback I saw online and the amount of interaction for anything related to the Tank Hector Luis Garcia fight, off the top, I can tell you it had to have been higher than 61,000. I'm not going for that. Number two, Rick Glacier is a known anti-PBC guy. He's a boxing industry guy. Rick Glacier's cool, but 61,000, I'm not going for that. So a number just got released today by Boxing Scene. Boxing Scene, it's somewhere in between 200 and 225,000. Now, Boxing Scene is one of the most trusted sources for boxing news in the entire game. Guys like Jake Donovan and so on and so forth. But the problem with Boxing Scene is that it's owned by Paramount, which is the same company that owns Showtime, which means they can fudge the numbers. They didn't state a corporate person as the source for their information. They said that our sources indicate to us that it's 200 to 225,000. Now, here's the problem with not having an exact corporate source or a name, somebody that's an executive at Paramount or Showtime to get these figures from. When it comes to numbers and companies that are publicly traded on the stock exchange, it is against federal law to fudge numbers because it violates investor trust. You understand me? You can't lie about the kind of revenue the company makes. You can't lie about pay-per-view numbers because you have investors in the company who need to have transparency and honesty. The Securities and Exchange Commission will find out if you were lying. They'll find out who lied, and you're going to federal prison. That's just how it works. This is how the SEC stock and filings and all that crazy good stuff works. So, Boxing Scene released a figure 200 to 225,000, but they didn't actually get somebody corporate. They didn't say Steven Espinoza said it. Steven Espinoza is the guy who's in charge of the boxing program with Showtime and all that good stuff. Obviously, because they can't lie about the numbers. So they made up a number, passed it along to one of the credible journalists that's at Boxing Scene, and we get 200 to 225,000, which I'm prone to believe it's probably somewhere around there, just based on the reaction, Tank's previous pay-per-view numbers, Hector Luis Garcia not being quite as magnetic a personality as Rolly Romero. But even that 200 to 225,000 that we're getting from BoxingScene.com, take that with a grain of salt, folks. The truth is going to be somewhere in between, and us as consumers of boxing will rarely ever get the truth. So just accept that as boxing. Pay attention to the sport of boxing, the technique of boxing, the fighters that are in the ring. Don't focus too much on the politics because it will make you grow bitter. It will make you grow skeptical, and it will make you not like boxing. Just trust me on this one. Pay attention to the sport. Understand the technique involved. Understand the styles and all that good stuff. Try not to focus too much on the politics because you'll hate boxing. The politics of the sport suck. So, anyways, I just wanted to break it down for you guys. Let me put it in a nutshell. Tank's pay-per-view numbers. Everybody's talking about Tank's pay-per-view numbers. Take notes. Boxing politics or Politricks 101 crash course, folks. Rick Glacier was the first one to release numbers. He said they only did 61,000 pay-per-view buys. Rick Glacier is a known industry insider, but he is also a very publicly known anti-PBC guy. So you can't trust the 61,000 pay-per-view numbers that Rick Glacier gave us. Sorry, as much as I like Rick Glacier, you can't go for that. Boxing Scene, which is a very, very credible source for boxing news, just released a figure today, and they said it was 200 to 225,000 pay-per-view buys. Here's the problem. In Boxing Scene, they didn't cite a specific corporate source working with Paramount or working with Showtime. Boxing Scene itself is owned by Paramount, which owns Showtime. Now, when it comes to numbers, you cannot lie to the public about numbers for a publicly traded company that's against federal law. That's the reason why a representative from Paramount or from Showtime did not specifically release the numbers. They had to go through journalists. So even take the numbers you get from Boxing Scene with a grain of salt, because it was not a specific corporate head from Paramount or Showtime that released those numbers. It was a journalist who could have been told any kind of number, because there is a buffer of plausible deniability if they pass it off to a journalist, as opposed to telling us, the consumers, exactly what went down with the pay-per-view buys. I don't really know. I don't really care. The fight was kind of cool. Tank got a knockout, but either way, I'm guessing they're probably somewhere around the 200,000 range, because that's what Tank has been doing thus far. Anyways, that's just a quick lesson in boxing politics. Pay attention to the sport. Try not to pay attention to the politics, and you'll be fine as a boxing fan. This is Hot Boxing Minute with some free game, folks. You're welcome. So, anyways, let me know what you think on the subject. 61,200, you let me know. Hit that like button if you haven't already done so. Press follow. This is Hot Boxing Minute, folks. The future of boxing analysis on YouTube and TikTok. Peace.